would you then say to do better, you have to not focus on your field, but try and have a more of a pragmatic approach?
I've always held on to one belief, the importance of curiosity and empathy. No matter how knowledgeable you are, it means nothing if you're not humble enough to then understand that there's more to learn out there.
Hello, Asrif, and welcome to PhD Hard Talk. Thank you so much for your time today. I know it's nighttime there. It's like AM time here. So thank you very much for wanting to share your time with me. To start off then, could you introduce yourself, your titles, and your research field?
Thank you, Noma, for having me. Yes, it is in the evening here in Kuala Lumpur. My name is Asrif. I am from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. I am a learning and development practitioner and researcher. And I've been working in the industry for about 15 years. And my current status as a student is I'm a student in Doctorate Business Administration program at Durham University. And my research is on the transfer of learning in leadership development as well as adult education. So my goal is to then understand how do we ensure that when organizations invest in leadership development, they get the best return on investments. That's my self in 30 seconds.
I love it. I love it. And I think what you're doing is impeccable. It's like to be or not to be. That is the question, because businesses do invest a lot of money, but the reality is that actually put into effect, and does it benefit the business?
Yeah, exactly. So, companies, if we look into the data from the past 3 years, slightly at the turn of 2015, going into just before the pandemic outbreak, on average, the global spend on corporate training is about 250 billion US dollars. Wow. Global amount, right? Plus minus, right? Now, if we look into the fraction of that amount, and if we look into the portion of that goes into leadership development, how much of that can we really measure in terms of value gained by the organization? It's difficult to measure, right?
I think it is, but what we have to bear in mind when it comes to human capital now is that we are global. And by that, I mean, we move from place to place. It's no longer like before, whereby you went into university or school and you worked your way up. Now you have opportunities. If IBM says, I'm opening a branch, let's say in Singapore, there's an opportunity, I'm going to apply. I'll take my family and I'll gain the experience. Then I'm willing to move to the US to gain more experience. So you have that kind of a market now, which makes it a bit complex, but exciting. It's no longer the senior people that get to move a lot. So is it really a loss in a way, or is it a gain in the sense of competitiveness for businesses?
It's an interesting question. If we look into the traditional model for organizational learning, right?
Okay.
It says 70% happens on the job, 20% of learning happens through coaching, and the other 10% is through formal learning, right? Yeah. So the amount that I cited earlier, most of them are for investments, for interventions via formal learning. So my belief is that the mode that you mentioned earlier, exposure through on-the-job training, exposure to postings to new geographical areas, or exposure through postings in new functions that a person is not accustomed to, I think that's the way forward to ensure that organizations are more effective in developing their people. So if we look into the 250, 300 billion amount that is spent for intervention that covers only 10% on development, from an organizational perspective, I think companies should be more creative in ensuring how we can give opportunities for people to learn on the job. And today, as work goes hybrid, it becomes more seamless, right? You don't really have to be physically in a particular area, although it helps, but some of the transactions or engagements can still happen in the virtual world while maintaining the level of productivity that organizations want. That's my view.
Okay, so I understand what it is that you're saying, but then I'm thinking when it comes to OD or organizational development and people in terms of human capital, talent, or employees, workers, whichever way you want to define them, how is your research going to benefit the businesses and the community out there in terms of people who are seeking employment, who are maybe don't want to work, you know, because you have a lot of people that just genuinely, I don't want to work, it's not my thing. And then we have a new market, which is everybody wants to be a business owner. I want to be an SME. How does your research help all those local groups there that I've just gone through?
Right, interesting. So the primary stakeholder of my research are organizations. So if we look into the problem statement that I touched briefly upon earlier, we look into the amount that organizations invest in talent development, right? And if we look into the model of measuring the effectiveness of those investments, if we look into the Kirkpatrick model of program evaluation, for example, there's the immediate program effectiveness where you fill out a form to give your feedback immediately after the completion of a program, right? And then you have another measure, which is learning, where you look into, if you put out a test or assessment, how well do you score in that test, right? And then the third level is behavior change. And the fourth level, which one is business result. The first and second is commonly done in organizations, but number 3 and number 4 is much more intangible, and it's much harder for companies to assess. So where my research comes in is not trying to close the gap in developing a new measure to assess behavior change, but and also business impact, is to keep in mind what you want at the end of the day in the design of the program that you invest in, right? Again, my stakeholder is the organizations, and then I want to make sure that they invest smartly, wisely, and the amount of waste is minimized. And then now back to your question, to people who are seeking for jobs, to those who are starting their businesses. I think when people are looking for employment, they do look for the financial stability, definitely. But there's also the factor of growth. There's a factor of personal development, and there's a factor of opportunity for that personal development. Therefore, I think if an organization has a strong strategy for talent development, I think it can be a strong selling point or a value proposition for them to then gain more the best talent in the market. That's my belief in terms of organization positioning themselves. We're going to give you a good salary, but at the same time, the opportunities that you're going to get, both on the job as well as through formal learning, will also be on a structured mode. Now, to your second group that you mentioned earlier, entrepreneurs, right? Money can be tight when capital can be a challenge when you are starting up a business, and the workforce today, I'm guessing, have high expectations in terms of what the organization can give to me, even if they are startups, no matter how big or small the size of the organization is. Now, they can still position themselves to say that learning happens on the job. But at the same time, if we look into the emergence of online learning, self-driven learning, massive online open courses, micro-credentials, those are very cost-effective ways of investments that smaller organizations can invest on their people. So I think if you look into the dimension of my study, what I'm trying to help is primarily organizations. However, there are indirect effects where they can position themselves as a learning organization to then attract more talents to come to them. No, that's my view.
I mean, that's quite interesting. And I love the fact that you've answered my key bullet points there. So thank you very much in terms of being focused. So now I'm thinking of the people in Kuala Lumpur. I'm not sure if I've said that right, and I apologize if I haven't in advance. You know, how does your research, because you're from Kuala Lumpur, how does your research benefit, you know, your community?
Yeah. I did a study last year to look into the top performers of the online learning platforms across 3 organizations. Okay. So these 3 organizations have invested an amount into 3 different online learning platforms. As you know, the business schools are offering now, Coursera, edX, and LinkedIn Learning, and many others are offering many modes of learning, right? Now, when I look into the top performers, the top 5 performers at each organization, and we went slightly deeper and have a conversation with them, we wanted to understand what drives them to undertake voluntary study on top of the heavy workload that they already have. Of course. Right? Yeah. So when they were giving their answers, the majority of them is not citing work requirement. So although the platform is given by the organization, they are not using it for work requirement. They're using it for personal development. For example, for people who are in finance, they are using those platforms to learn more about HR, to learn more about supply chain, and even engineering management to a point. So I think that is one trait of lifelong learners that I believe organizations need to really capitalize on and provide the conducive environment for them to thrive. And then when we ask them what is their main challenge in trying to pursue this voluntary study, most of them were saying time. So people who do not undertake in the self-voluntary learning say they don't have enough time. People who do undertake in voluntary learning say time is the main challenge. So that to me indicates that people who are lifelong learners in organizations, they don't have time, but they make time for it in the train. You know, you can even do it listening. Even podcasts are a form of learning today, right? Now, that is the community that we are trying to address here. People who reside within an organization, who have the drive and willingness to really pursue self-learning. And we want organizations to then fully invest with a targeted view for this demography. So it's twofold. Number one, people who are already lifelong learners in organizations, how can companies make maximize their potential? And those who are not pursuing like voluntary learning, how we can then drive them towards, motivate them towards voluntary learning. Because I believe that is where you identify areas that you might have strength on. Because I learned that from my own experience.
Do tell.
So I didn't do well as an undergraduate.
Okay.
I did badly as an undergraduate. So I studied engineering in the US.
Are you good with maths then?
I thought I was, but
that's how I felt when I did my first ever bit of coursework. I was like, you can't count, no, man. No, this is
no, I did well in high school for math and science. So I thought the natural route at the time is just to go for engineering, right? So long story short, 4 years in the US, I did quite poorly in my undergraduate degree. And then on my graduation day, the commencement speaker was President Barack Obama. So he spoke at my commencement in 2006. Beautiful speech. Every year I would listen to it once at least, and you know, it was so inspiring. But I made a vow on myself on that very day, walking down the stage of my graduation. I vowed to myself I would never touch a textbook ever again. I would never step into a classroom ever again. I'm so done with school. You know, Norma, I was so convinced that I did not want. So I went to work. So I sort of enjoyed working, but 5-6 years down the road, I felt life becoming more monotonous with the 9 to 5 cycle, day in, day out, and I wanted to challenge myself. So I thought, what bigger challenge do I have in life other than going back to the classroom, right? So I went out, and fortunately I got a place in the MBA program at Imperial College. I did that for 2 years while working. So when we got our first baby at the time, so I got more than what I bargained for.
Of course you did.
But fortunately, I graduated in 2016.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, Noma, I felt a gap of emptiness in life because the life of sheer busyness and hectic life over the past 2 years, I suddenly have this time on my hand, right? And I miss the drive of being in the classroom, getting engaged in debate, exchanging ideas with my classmates, speaking to the faculty, and so forth. So learning is so different when you're slightly more matured and you have a bit more experience of working, right?
Yes.
So I did what anybody in that position would do. So I applied to another master's program. I got into the master's in social innovation program at Cambridge. Did that for another 2 years while working. And then we got another baby at the time. Again, I got more than what I asked for, right? And there's some sort of weird correlation there between the degrees and childbirth in my family. So somehow.
Oh, wow. It's the joy, isn't it? The sheer joy of, wow, I got in and it's Cambridge, baby.
I actually took a semester off because my wife was delivering, and I really appreciate the university for according me that one term off. But I managed to catch up and submit my thesis on time. So I completed the program. I was supposed to graduate March of 2020. But then COVID came, and I have not taken my scroll yet. Maybe next year, maybe it's a 2-year delay. So at that juncture, I was in the same point that I was after I got my MBA, which is how I went to apply for the doctorate program at Durham. Now, over the past 10 years, doing both working and studying, it really opened my eyes on the value of learning. I know it's a lifelong endeavor. Yeah. It is something that I could not live without, and it does not have to happen in the classroom all the time. The way I'm approaching work is different. Yeah. The way I'm engaging with others is different. And what I'm hoping is that the way I lead my team is also different.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So
for you.
So that's how my own experience in becoming a lifelong learner drive my interest in researching on organizational learning, and as well as lifelong learning for individuals. So long story short.
No, amazing. I love your journey. The fact that you went through, I mean, firstly, you made a vow, which is a commitment. That was your own wedding ceremony with yourself, where you said, you know what, I'm done. And Barack is talking, you're just like, this is not for me, I'm done, right? And then a few years later, months later, then you realize, actually, I'm empty, I'm used to being busy. Then you go back on your vow. So in other words, for the audience at home, is to say, even if you make a commitment, pride should not stop you from saying, do you know what, reflection is a beautiful thing. And you do learn from situations, specifically, the wiser you grow, the better it is for you, in a sense. And now you're at Durham, Newcastle is beautiful, you're close to Newcastle, and it's such an amazing university. You're doing your postgrad. So, what I'm trying to say is kudos to you for sharing your journey, and hopefully it helps someone at home. Now, to move on to exciting things, it's your podcast. And the reason why I want to discuss your podcast basically is to understand what your vision is and why did you start, the postdoc, podcast.
Great. It began over the past 10 years. I said I've been a student while working, right?
Yeah.
almost every other week, Norma, I've been receiving messages via phone, via LinkedIn and so forth on different questions.
Okay.
Preparing an application, selecting a school, writing my essay, getting interviews, getting letters of recommendations, and so forth. And every time I find myself having to repeat my own experience and my views and insights on how do you tackle these challenges, right?
Yeah.
So from there, I began a blog, a very simple blog on Blogspot, nothing fancy, but all the answers to those questions, from finding a purpose all the way to post-graduation plans.
Yeah.
I've outlined in about 20 posts. Now the blog grew into about a 50,000 word document. And with that, the content will be turned into a book.
Okay.
So I've just received a book deal from an academic publisher. And thank you. And we are looking at sorry, actually.
You know,
So no, not much. No. So we are looking at a March, April 2022 release of the book. It's entitled Staying the Course, Navigating the Challenges of Part-Time Study. Again, finding a purpose, selecting a program, making the most of your time, dissertations, and so forth. The podcast is an emulation of what I was sharing,
of course,
and is trying to capture on all the stories that are out there. I don't think I'm alone in this, Norma. I think you have a similar motivation in starting this show as well. There are many stories out there, and I think it's worth capturing somewhere, at least within the community that I'm in, within the network that I'm in. You know, I've spoken to somebody who began his PhD at 50. I've spoken to somebody who did his PhD while working in a factory. I've spoken to someone who was doing his second bachelor's degree, can you believe it or not? Because for the sheer curiosity of it, right? So all of this story, I felt, you know, it's nice for me to house it somewhere. I don't know who will benefit from it. But if I manage to then, you know, get a small people who benefit from this content, I think I'll be content enough to then know that I've breached the supply and demand side of, you know, what society wants and what society has in a way. So in a nutshell, Norma, began as a line of questions, made it into a blog. The blog will become a book. I'm trying to copy that model and trying to put it into a podcast and trying to capture stories that people have out there.
Okay. So in terms of your book then, you know, you are into growth in terms of your research. We've talked about that, and organizations. And to me, Asrif, you are a brand. And, you know, as much as you can say, you know, it's not a lot of money, but you're the brand, and people want to hear you speak because you have knowledge. And I believe also in that book, you haven't put everything in there. So if they do want to know more, they can hire you to come and speak, and they can pay you. He charges £5,000. You know,
I like the sound of that.
So please do contact Asrif. Call him. So but basically, you know, you are the brand, essentially, jokes aside. And I do believe, from what I've seen of your podcast, that there's so much there. And, you know, as much as we go to university and we're doing all of this research, it's always nice to hear when someone shares and you think, do you know what? That was really bad. But it came to pass, and you start to realize that, you know, what you think is terrible, it does come to pass, and you can see the light at the end of the tunnel. And that's what your podcast does. It reveals, it's like a revelation, in a sense, to me anyway. I don't know if that was your vision. So I think your book is going to be amazing. So I'll be looking forward to reading your book.
Thank you so much, Norma. Thank you so much. You know, people, you know, when I was questioning myself, can I do it? Can I not do it? Do I have the money? Do I have the time? Do I have the energy to do it? I felt that if what I'm doing with my podcast was in existence 10 years ago, it could be of help for me.
Yeah.
So I believe there are many others on the similar situation today. And if there's 1 or 2 episodes that's relevant to them, and I think it should be a combination of many sources, right?
Yeah.
Content like yours is superb because it's hard talk. It goes straight direct to the core of the research that people are trying to put out there. You ask challenging questions. So I think we complement the content, the type of content that we do. I'm so happy to meet each other because I think it complements each other. And the sense of community is so strong across social media, on YouTube, on Twitter. The sense of support is so strong, especially in terms of trying to ensure that everybody's well-being is in order. I think that's a positive development in academia, although there are still many challenges at the same time.
Excellent. So to go back to stuff that you've said, and I think it will round us off nicely in terms of people who work and are in research, be it masters, BA, postdoc. I'm trying to go through the list now to ensure, or teaching assistants, etc. You know, in your own words or opinion, do you think it's wise that one works and still maintains full-time education? Do you think the fruits are better, or do you think, nah, it's not a thing? Just based on the stories that you've heard and your own experience.
I'm a firm believer in doing both at the same time. Because I think the power in it is in the ability of immediately applying what you learn in theory and concept out into the real world in real time on a day-to-day basis.
Of course.
However, I do stress that part-time study, part-time learning, doing both is not for everyone. We have to acknowledge some people can do both. Some people would prefer to focus on one thing at a time, and both have its own set of challenges. Not one is better or the other, definitely no. So my experience have been the former. I've been doing both for the past decade. I'm currently doing it. And the value that I cherish in the application that I can do in the workplace. But in every conversation that I have with people who are asking me whether they can do it both at the same time, I always tell them that it's not for everyone. There is quite a dropout rate as well in some of the part-time programs, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just a matter of how individuals prefer to focus their time on. If you give me a chance, Norma, do I want to do my PhD full-time? Yes, I do.
Okay.
But I have my work commitments and other commitments here in Kuala Lumpur. Therefore, I can only find an opportunity to do two at once. But there are classmates who were doing my MBA together with me, who were doing it once, and they said never again.
Of course.
And again, there's nothing wrong with that, because each one of us have different sets of commitments. So as much as I'm an advocate for part-time study, learning while working, I consistently, just as much as I advocate, I stress that it is not for everyone. It is very unique to an individual, and we need to respect that. And you should then, you know what I try to tell people to do? Test drive. Try to take up some of the shorter courses, the micro credentials and all of that. See if you can balance your time and manage to complete the course. And then you embark on a longer scale course. So that's my take, Norma.
Wow, that is quite interesting and it's quite rich. I don't think I'll add anything because I like that. So in terms of the next question, based on your research, what you realized was, for example, you made the example of someone working in finance and they wanted to understand supply chain. They wanted to understand HR, for example. Based on that bit of key information, would you then say to do better, you have to not focus on your field, but try and have a more of a pragmatic approach to issues so that you are sustainable in your working life and education also? Or would you say I'm going out on a limb? But I'm just using your findings here.
I've always held on to one belief on that matter, and I first heard this from an author. His name is Andy Storch. He mentioned the importance of curiosity and empathy in becoming a wholesome leader, right? So curiosity enables you to become better at what you do, and empathy enables you to build meaningful relationships with others, right? Now, going back to your question, I believe that any person can have a specialization area. My specialization at the moment is learning and development. But I think the curiosity that I have drives me in always trying to understand, how do I read financial statements? What are the processes in supply chain? What are the risk factors that I need to undertake when I'm making a business decisions, and so forth. And that covers the entirety of an organization, right? So as much as we are deep in one area, I think it's equally important for us to at least have a grasp on the basics or one-on-one on the other areas that is within the ecosystem that we work in. So I think that is how curiosity drives our own personal development. Empathy, to complement that, I believe empathy is super important, because I think no matter how skillful you are in the functions that you carry, no matter how knowledgeable you are in the subjects that you master, it means nothing if you do not respect others, if you have arrogance, or if you are not humble enough to then understand that there's more to learn out there. So it goes back to curiosity and also empathy. Curiosity enables those who have specialization to also build breadth to complement the depth that they have in an area. As much as I'm learning about learning and development, leadership development, transfer of learning at this time, I'm encroaching, or I'm extending into psychology. I'm going into sociology. I'm going into the other social sciences to truly then understand what's going on in that part of the behavioral science. Is an area that I'm super interested in as well. Although it is at the periphery of what I'm studying in my own discipline. So it's always important to always have a peek, or have a touch, or have a feel on what's going on in the other fields that are adjacent to our own fields. Norma, the only fields that I haven't touched are physics and chemistry and all the other, and math, because I'm not too good at it. But at least I read news on it. So at least, on Google News, I do follow the technology section. So on a day-to-day basis, I know what Elon Musk is talking about, what Jeff Bezos is talking about, what they're trying to do, at least that much I know.
Oh, wow. Amazing. Do you know, I don't know if you follow this blog, it's called Finimize.
No.
You get, it's Finimize, Finimize. It has the latest from China to the US to the DR to Africa. It's quite amazing. So you get all this information, and it's quite simple and easy to understand. So if, for example, like Elon Musk bought the factory in Germany, and now he's producing the engines for BMWs, etc. Like he's put himself in a nice place, basically. And it's quite interesting to see the business moves. So if you like that kind of stuff, definitely that's
Got that down. I'll check it out.
to follow. So I guess we're coming to the end. And what I would like to know is, why did you come on PhD Hard Talk? Why did you agree?
I want to learn, Norma.
Okay.
I learn best through conversations.
Okay.
And I'm learning a lot from your sharing today, your previous episodes. And I'm learning a lot from the conversations that we have today. Because the questions that you ask pushing the right buttons for me to then trigger my thinking, right? You don't just touch on the surface. You challenge me to go deeper and then excavate the thoughts and views that I have. So it's about learning, Norma. I think this past half an hour is a learning process, and it's one that I'll take with me moving forward. If I have another conversation with a friend, first of all, it's cool to say I was just on this podcast over the weekend. It's cool. But secondly, I can also share that the dimensions of research is such that it is not something that just goes into a journal that nobody reads it. It goes back to society. It might not be apparent to everyone, but conversations like Hard Talk is a platform where the research that people are doing gets the rightful highlight. And it's also a way of learning for the audience, for the guests, also for the host, I hope, from this conversation, Omar. That's why I'm here.
Wow. I didn't expect that. So thank you. I guess what I want to share is, so I have to read this, is if you would like to know more about Asrif and his podcast, you have to go on Stay in the Course to talk about your podcast journey, which is Asrif Yusoff videos on YouTube. Is that correct?
Yeah, youtube.com/Asrif Yusoff. I'll be there. Or asrif.org. That is my website and everything. All my links on Twitter and the rest are there.
Yeah. And then you've got a blog as well, which you've just recently published as well, in terms of business review.
On the LSE business review, that's on the research that I did on lifelong learners. Yeah.
Okay, amazing. So essentially today we've had an amazing discussion, and I don't want it to end, but unfortunately we know that the concentration span for a human being is 30 to 45 minutes and then they're gone. So all good things must come to an end. What I've taken away from this, you know how you mentioned you hope that I do learn, is resilience. I think that's the first thing that you touched on the most. And then in terms of feeling empty when you're used to a certain routine and not looking for, excuse my language, dumb crap to do, and finding something that benefits you and your next generations to come, going on to the third generation. For example, the book would not necessarily benefit you that much, but the second generation from you and the third generation from you will definitely benefit so much from your work, your podcasts, your books, everything that you're doing, they would definitely benefit. And your last name, Yusoff, will be the last name that everybody wants. The girls, they'll be like, hey, where's your son?
I hope.
So I've learned that as well, in terms of go for what you want to do, but do it in a way that you're happy with. It doesn't feel like work. It's something that you enjoy. I don't know if that's what you were sharing, but that's what I got from you.
Definitely, yeah.
And then finally is, if you are curious, be curious for the right things, not to go on the internet and go on the black web and start searching for things that do not benefit you, but be curious for the right things, So essentially, those are the key things that I've learned today. And I am so excited to get this on YouTube because I feel like your wise words were very beneficial today. So on that note, I would like to say thank you so much. I will call you Dr. Asrif Yusoff because I know you will get that. And I would like to say thank you so much. Don't forget to purchase Dr. Asrif Yusoff's book, read his blogs and listen to his podcast. They are amazing. If you feel like you're confused, that's okay. Go and speak to Dr. Asrif Yusoff. He will not tell you the right thing. He's not going to spoon feed you. We don't do that. We educate you. That's what we're here for. It's all about education. Yeah, thank you very much, Asrif, for your time.
I had so much fun. I had so much fun, and I hope we can have a chat again. Yeah.
Definitely. I'll come on yours. Why not?
Yeah. That'll be great, Norma, actually. 2022, here we come.
Yeah, here we come.